Hello and welcome back to another episode of From the Field. I actually believe this is probably the longest stretch of continuous content we have on the channel so far, because we have the show and then we have Howdy Partner. Unfortunately, I can't thank whatever partner was presenting earlier because we was too busy doing our pre-checks. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you now also enjoy the content that we are going to be delivering today with Brent and Ruskin here, which Ruskin has been on the show before. I think this is the first time for you, Brent, isn't it?
It is my first time, so be gentle with me.
Yeah. And I need to get your name right because I've been calling you Brent this whole freaking time, and this is Brent.
Right. Okay.
I am absolutely terrible with names. It's amazing that I'm even allowed in front of customers. Cool. And you will, everyone will notice this is part 5 of How to Become a Network Ninja. This is the last episode, and as we're talking about everything great about network optimization, Ruskin will tell us more about today's series. And I want to stress again, even if you have missed the other 4 parts of the series, you don't need to worry. Each of them really hold up to their own independently. And I will pop up a few QR codes to the recap shows that we have. Some of them are on YouTube and some of them are still on Twitch, which is awesome. And as I said, it really takes you through the foundations, which is really goes over the fact that networking is really what makes the cloud possible. It really actually was what makes anything in terms of modern day computing and like applications. Like without computing, like your customers couldn't get to you. Modern businesses wouldn't really work because you'd have to all work on the same computer, which I don't know about you, would get very old. I remember when I was younger and we only had one computer, but there was 4 friends. So we'd all used to actually play Serious Sam, I think it was, all on the same keyboard and mouse. And like, it was amazing what a lot of hard will and dedication got you back in the day. And like, you know, because you have the, was it maximum amount of key presses? And as you're trying to do something, all you hear the computers go beep, beep, beep. And it was always the best person to have a mouse as well. And they always had to end up carrying the team. Anyway, off topic. Then we went back into connectivity, which is really talking about VPCs, how to do pairing, the greatness that is Transit Gateway, and things like sharing it through RAM, which is not RAM access memory in this context. It is the resource. Oh God, I forgot.
Access Manager.
Access Manager. That's. See, this is why having too many acronyms in your head, it confuses you. And then going into.
There's too many. Agreed.
The down of acronyms. And then we're going to have Transit Gateway pairing and private link and all of that goodness. Going to hybrid resilience, where we had our awesome partners MegaLink talking through how to actually build up resilient networks through Direct Connect and using their intelligent routing service, which they represent as like red and blue, which is really the concept having like routers in the same data center but on different racks. So if one fails, then you can actually continue operations through the other one. And then we finally had the networking security side of things, what covered off network firewall, centralized and distributed security architectures. And then we also was talking about the new feature that was released, which is TLS inspection, which if you have any questions around this, Brett is a guru on this. So feel free to throw your questions out there while we go through this presentation, because as I said, you have access to us. Well, these 2 smart people, we've already proven that that I struggle at times, but luckily we have Ruskin here and Brett. So Brett, do you want to give yourself a quick introduction?
Yep, sure. So my name's Brett. I'm actually in Perth in Western Australia. Just got back last night from a trip to the US, so you're catching me. Hopefully should not be too much jet lagged. And I've been with AWS about 7.5 years, and my day job is looking after customers, but I also am a networking specialist. Used to do that for many, many years. So please ask a lot of questions. Ask anything you like. We will try and answer it for you.
Awesome. I guess I'm next. So thanks, Casey, for having me back again, and really good to be doing the show, especially with Brett. We did one last time with Megaport with hybrid resilience. It wasn't too long ago, so thanks for doing a recap as well on that, Casey. I'm Ruskin. If you don't remember me from last time, I'm based out of Auckland in New Zealand. I haven't been on a trip recently anywhere, so I don't have my jet lag. So we'll be gentle with you, Brett. So Casey, I still remember sharing my PC with my family as well. When I first arrived in New Zealand, we had this little compact, and it was the first machine in it was in New Zealand with a DVD-ROM, and it was such a weird thing to have. And I remember sharing that. So my sister was in university and I wasn't. And she kind of hates me for not letting her use it for her assignments, but then I just played Yahoo Pool. If you remember those days. So I loved the PC. But yes, we used to share it a lot with a 56K modem where we did not know anything about networking. But then you come into the cloud and networking is everywhere. You have to touch it. So hopefully the series and the recap has kind of helped you come along the way to becoming a ninja. And the last part today will be quite informational as well. So thanks for having us again, Casey. Over to you.
Awesome. And I forgot about the days of 56K modem and the fact that as soon as someone picked up the phone, it killed the internet connection. That led to many fights in my family.
You guys are so young. I started out with a 1200 baud modem, right? So, you know, there we go. Now how old I am.
We'll try to refrain from calling you old man throughout the show. Sweet. Getting back into this, so really, if we're talking about any optimization, we are really going to have to talk about the really foundational pillar of networking within the AWS in the cloud, which is what we would call the VPC. And there's not really one way of doing it. Like at the end of the day, you can craft a VPC in many different ways and all weird and wonderful flavors. So what are some items to consider and to look out for?
Yeah, so Casey, that's a great way to start. So with VPC, as you pointed out, it's a fundamental block, right? And for today's topic, what we're going to be talking about is how do you optimize your network? So through the past, 4 sessions? So is that 8 weeks? We've had one every fortnight. So we started off with example.com. You're coming on to AWS. Awesome. You're looking at cloud. The first thing which you'll most likely do in the cloud is, set up a VPC. You'll give it some kind of CIDR range within our allowed limits, and away you go. And then you start connecting it to on-prem, you start connecting your VPCs together, and you put some level of security in it. And then you suddenly realize that, I have quite a few items in the cloud. I have quite a few VPCs. How do I start looking at optimization? And VPC becomes kind of like that glue which holds everything together, right? And you're looking at, cool, I have this here. Now let me make sure I have my IP addresses correctly spread out, etc. So that's what we'll be talking about today. And one of the major things we'll be talking about today is this blog, which Brett himself has written as well, which covers a lot of optimization. You're the only one here, so I'll give you all the credit. Don't worry about that. So I'm going to hand it over to Brett for a little bit. So in there, one of the things is VPC planning. So tell us a little bit about that section. I'm not sure if you remember. There was a lot of good stuff, VPC sizing and things like that. So what made you write that blog? What are some of the things you researched and customer anecdotes which you can share with us?
Yeah, look, and the thing about a lot of the stuff that we do at AWS, and obviously you guys know this, is we do so much based on customer feedback. And a lot of the questions that customers ask, I go like, I'm getting this question all the time. What do we do with it? And so a couple of us got together and said, well, this blog post needs to be written because we're getting these questions. Going a little bit to the side for a second, because I think it's kind of important. The cool thing about VPCs in AWS is they are all totally software defined, right? it's really easy for you to create VPCs, create subnets, create routing, and then if you don't like it, tear it down again and try again. It's all software defined. So don't be afraid to experiment just to see how things work. However, it becomes difficult to change your VPC structure after you've put resources into it. So by the time you put EC2 instances or you put transit gateways and other things and you build your entire network, it's actually really difficult to change it at that point because there's things on that network. This is no different to networks back in the day when I used to do them on-prem, where you used to actually have physical routers and switches. It was kind of easy to design, but once it was in place, hard to change. And that's why we wrote the blog post, because we wanted people to have a sense of, okay, what's right, what's wrong, what should I do? And the fundamental question was like, well, okay, how big should my VPC be in terms of how many IP addresses? Ruskin said CIDR range before. CIDR is CIDR. It's classless interdomain routing. And that's a term that goes way, way back to about like 1989. It's a long story about subnet masks. Let me not talk about that right now. But basically, it is your IP range that you're going to put into your VPC. And so the question is, okay, well, should I put a really big range? Should I put a really small range? The challenge, if you put a range that's really, really small, is you can only put a small number of EC2 instances into the VPC. The challenge, if you put a very large range, is that you're wasting IP addresses. And it's very difficult, extremely difficult, for you to get networks to talk to each other that have the same IP range. I actually wrote a blog post about this as well. Again, common question from customers. So if you go, I'm going to create, say, 10 VPCs all with very large IP ranges, you're going to run out of IP address very quickly. It's going to be hard to get them to talk to each other. So smaller is better. But if you create them too small, and you can add IP addresses on to your VPC, which is cool, but eventually it gets kind of awkward to deal with that. So the right answer is it depends, which is what the blog post is about. It requires you to think a little bit ahead. And the other piece out of that is, well, should I have one big VPC and put everything into it? Spoiler alert, no, you shouldn't. Should I have lots of small VPCs and connect them together? And again, there's a thing there where you can absolutely do that, but it might cost you in terms of data transfer to connect all those VPCs together. So it's a happy medium somewhere in the middle. It's going to be different for everybody. That's my really long answer for our favorite answer, which is it depends. If you like.
You'll make a great consultant.
This is my job. This is what I do.
I remember when we started off with VPCs as well. I think because 16 was the largest one, we kind of just went ahead with 16 all over the show. And then we realized that we didn't even use a quarter, like even an eighth of that range, and we started trimming it down. Even as like myself, I can visualize 16 a little bit better. I can visualize 24 a little bit better. But when it comes to like 17, 18, 19, those kind of numbers, those kind of subnet masks, it's really hard for me to understand where does it stop? Where should I get the next VPC beginning? So I can completely empathize with people using 16s or 24s everywhere. It's just easy maths, right? Easy CIDR maths, if you can call it. So it's easier that way. So, and we'll show you some techniques on why you don't need to do CIDR maths anymore. And you could use a service, which we have, and go through a demo of that. But yes, really good tips. It depends a lot of times, right? So I think like TGVs and firewall subnets can be really small, and something like other aspects you have to allocate a little bit more space for them. So yeah, let's get into it. Awesome. Any questions from your side, Casey, on that? I know you were wondering around VPC planning. I'm sure you have a lot of customers around questions around VPCs and stuff. Anything from your side which has come up over the past few years?
There's a lot. Like networking is definitely one of the hot topics when you deal with any like business, because as I mentioned before, it kind of makes the world go round. But as you was talking, it goes back to when I used to manage infrastructure, the old company I used to work for, and that was back when the default CIDR range was 10.0.0.0, which also happens to be a very common CIDR range for on-prem, and also a lot of our SaaS companies. So when VPC peering came out and you wanted to reduce your DTO, it now became a game of chicken on who changes their VPC CIDR range to allow that to work. So yeah, I've definitely found it the hard way, and learned a lot over the years.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about VPC planning, right? So what I want to do is, Casey, if you could put my screen back up on.
Yep.
Awesome.
There you go.
So thank you for that. So CIDR range planning and stuff, it's great. People ended up using Excel sheets. I still remember working for a company, and we were discussing around which CIDR ranges to use, and I was so peed off with this other team which used the same CIDR range as I did. For the CI/CD account and their VPC, and I had to peer to that, and there was no way to do it. So just like you said, Casey, we were trying to play chicken on who has the most resources inside the VPC, so they didn't need to change the CIDR. So unfortunately, the CI/CD team won on that, and I had to change my CIDR range, and it was a pain in the butt for that. But hopefully, we can avoid it. By looking at the service which we have called Amazon VPC IP Address Manager, or a short form called IPAM. And a lot of customers have a lot of VPCs out there, a lot of CIDR ranges, and we want to demonstrate today on how you can use this service to manage all of that, right? And you might be thinking, oh, I already have all these CIDR ranges, I already have an Excel sheet. It's too late. It's actually not, right? Because you can still use IPAM to bring your existing VPC CIDR ranges into the service as well. It has this really cool concept which does analysis, like retrospective analysis, as you can see on the screen. And it kind of discovers all your CIDRs as well. It picks up like your defaults VPCs as well, and I'll show you how to kind of ignore those, because sometimes you don't really put resources in it, and it's great to get started, but you don't really use the default VPC much. You can monitor your network across multiple accounts, and we'll demonstrate that. And you can automate IP assignments, and I'll show you a little bit of a CDK demo as well, which can do that. So for today's one, what we're going to do is set up a structure in our AWS account, which kind of mirrors what I have on the screen. Again, this depends on what your requirements are. You can split it and dice it in any shape or form. But for today's demo, what I'm going to do is show you how you can split a /12 range into two 14 ranges into your dev and prod. So for us, I'm going to, example.com has chosen that their dev IP CIDR, their class is different, and the prod one, their CIDR space is different. And each region will have a dev and a prod, a dev and a prod, and dev and a prod. So we'll show you how to split this up in your IP address manager, but you can completely split this on its head, right? So you can say one region is allocated this CIDR and the other region is allocated this CIDR, whatever way you choose to do it. It is all possible. The other cool. Yep.
Just quickly, so we also talk a lot about the best practice of having a multi-account setup. Does this tool also work across accounts?
It definitely does, and that's what the demo will be today. So we highly recommend if you're doing if you have multiple teams who want to have those account level isolations, then you create multiple accounts, and I'll show you how IPAM pools work across accounts as well. Again, but using Resource Access Manager, which you mentioned earlier as well. And we can show you how different accounts, different slices and dices can be compliant to your strategy as well. So we will show you how to use tagging, for example, to enforce some of those policies using your IPAM. And also your sizes. So Brett mentioned a little bit about what's the biggest size you can, what's the size you recommend, what's the minimum size. And again, you could do this at a pool level. So you can say, we don't want to waste CIDR ranges. A lot of people are allocating 16 because it's easy maths. Hang on a second, let's not do that. Let's just make sure we do 24s, for example. So you can set a max and a min. In this demo, I'm a little bit lazy. My max is a little bit weak. I'm just going to choose 24 as my max and min, but we'll demonstrate how to do that as well. Anything else to add on that, Brett, or around IPAM from your experience?
I was going to say, just as an aside as well, that obviously we're talking about IPv4 today, but we also support IPv6. And so if you really have massive IP address allocation limitations, and IPv6 is something you should look at. We're not going to talk about that today too much, but just be aware that it's obviously there and supported, so you can definitely do that. And the other thing I should add about building, again, the multi-account structure, I just want to reinforce this because we talk about this all the time. The biggest thing for me is about blast radius. If you have a single account with all of your projects in it and all of your applications, and you're relying on people to not go away and touch things that they shouldn't, or you're relying on tagging to stop people from accessing things and changing things that they shouldn't, which is an okay strategy. But by the time you get lots of applications in the same VPC and in the same account, it gets very, very complex. And it's very easy to get something wrong and have somebody go in and accidentally click on something that they shouldn't have, and boom, your application is down. That's not a good thing. So again, that multi-account strategy is a significant thing that we recommend. And when you do that, of course, that means multiple VPCs, and that means hence the sizing discussion, which we're having today. For me, if you're just playing around and you're building out dev environments, for example, again, even a /24 might be too big, but it's a great place to start. It's a nice middle ground. Ooh, nature yogurt. Awesome, good question. What percentage of customers use IPv6 versus IPv4? The short answer is not enough. We have lots of customers who end up with, constrained on their IP ranges, and they're not doing that. So it requires, the problem is it actually requires a lot of effort. I believe IPv6 adoption globally at the moment is at about 4%, which is not a lot at all. So it would be great to see more than that. So please, consider that. It does require a mindset change. Ruskin was talking about having nice, easy to read, /24, /8, /16. It makes sense for the human brain. IPv6 is way worse than that, right? You've got all the way up to /128, and it's like, the concept is the same. It's just harder to do the maths.
And I think the sense of familiarity people have with IP. Yes, I think the sense of familiarity that people have with IPv6, v4 is really like anchors into it, because it's deal with the enemy,
Yep.
There's a little bit of a misalignment as well, right? We recently supported IPv6 subnets only, but there is still a little bit of a catching up to do outside of those other providers, other places which do support have internet connectivity. Not everything supports IPv6. Brett, do you have any kind of prediction or a crystal ball that says when will IPv6 be ubiquitously supported across all these different providers and different hops, right? Because right now they're still going from IPv6 to IPv4, so you can't get away from it. What's your take on that?
And it's still a challenge, right? Because if you think about, I'm using IPv6, but I need to connect to an external API provider or something else out in the big internet world that only uses IPv4, you still need those IPv6 to IPv4 gateways, right? Unfortunately, the world has not completely converted, and it's a problem. If I was looking at my crystal ball, I'd really love to see, 100% IPv6 compatibility sometime in about, 2004. Because IPv6 was designed in 1996, and unfortunately, people are still getting there. And even us, we're not perfect here. The amount of IPv6 services that we have are certainly very, very large. And occasionally we have gaps in our feature list there. So please, if you're looking at IPv6 and you do find gaps, come and talk to us. We love feedback. We love talking to our service teams and going, hey, we really, really need this. There is a goal internally to make sure that everything is IPv6 enabled. I don't have a date on that, but it's certainly what we want to go to, because we know IPv4 address space is really, really limited. So we have to make sure that happens.
Awesome. So great question. Let's go on to the demo. So Casey.
Now that I've taken you way off track.
No.
If we don't go on tangents, it's not a from the field show.
It's the whole. Got to go down the rabbit holes. Got to look at it. I'm totally cool.
All right, give me 1 second while I get everything up. So this will be quite interesting, right? So I am going to share quite a few different screens. So just bear with me a little bit over here while I get everything up and running.
Ruskin's one of these fancy guys that have must be like a 10K monitor, because if he shares his whole screen, like everything is like an ant. And
10K monitor, that'll be good.
I'm surprised he can even read it. Like that just goes to show how good your eyesight is.
I sit too close to the screen. Maybe that's a bad thing, but hopefully you can see my console.
I can see you moving your head around like this, like looking at things, right?
Yeah, I have two screens. Awesome. So IPAM. All right. Okay. So let's go all the way back to the AWS console. So this is my beautiful AWS console. I have an organization. So let me go to that as well and show you a little bit about how my organization is set up. So as you can imagine, we have a bunch of accounts, and I'll show you how my account structure is set up in my AWS organization, so you can kind of visualize it a little bit. Pretty simple stuff. I haven't been creative at all. As developers and engineers are, we just kind of got it working for this demo. But let me zoom in a little bit. Awesome. How's the zoom there, Casey and Brett? Can you see it clearly?
It's readable for me.
Readable for you. Okay, that's good. Now let me do it one more time. Okay, so I have an organization. I have a prod account inside that, and I have a shared services account inside that. I do have other accounts as well. I have like dev and test OU and stuff like that. Just to kind of show you how you can use it across lots of different accounts. But to keep it simple for this demo, I'm just going to use the prod organization account and the shared services organization account. Shared services can be synonymous to your networking account, for example. Whatever you choose to name it, right? I've just chosen to name it shared services. So those two accounts will be the key accounts for this demo. So the first thing I want to do is go in and delegate into my organization, allow it to delegate IPAM to my shared services account. So I've done that. I'll skip that part, right? So today's demo is not about how to use IPAM, but how to use IPAM for VPC specifically. A lot of cool videos out there on how to set up IPAM and stuff. So if you want to dive a little bit deeper into it, please go for it. But in the interest of time, I'll skip all that logistical part on how to create delegated admins and stuff and go to the meat of it. So let me go to my shared services account and make sure I get the right tab. Awesome. So this is my shared services account. You can see it on the top with SS on there, and that's my shared services account. So to get to IPAM, it's quite interesting. You actually have to go to the VPC console. So if I go to VPC up here, just click on that. And on the bottom, if you go all the way to the bottom, you'll see this thing called VPC IP address manager. So let's click on that. Awesome. So I've got a nice window open up. I'm still in my shared services account, and I'm at my VPC IP address manager, and I can see a dashboard. So this dashboard has some cool metrics, and I will talk about that a little bit further down the track. And I have created an IPAM already. So how the first steps to do it is creating a IPAM, right? So if you go to planning, and if you go to IPAM, let's go to create IPAM. So allow, you must check this box to create an IPAM. Yep, obviously. Let's do a name first. So Twitch IPAM. And you can, remember the top level IPAM we created. Sorry, not the top level IPAM, the pools. So the pools go inside the associated to the IPAM, and I'll show you that as well. And you can select which regions you operate in, right? So say, for example, you have deployed your VPCs into Sydney, Tokyo, and Singapore, and you can select that down here. Depending on which ones you want, you can do more or less or just the one, up to you. And once you select your regions, it will actually create a default private scope for you. It will create a public scope for you. So the scope is essentially captures all the resources within the private IP space or public IP space. And it also creates this thing called a resource discovery, which essentially is like a crawler which goes out to your accounts, to your regions, and discovers all of these resources. It takes a wee while to do that. So what I have done is I've created an IPAM already, but you can see the process on how to create one. So let's cancel out of it. But yeah, the process is pretty straightforward on that. So let's cancel out of it and let's go to the IPAM already created. So let's look at that. So what I've done is essentially done Sydney, Singapore, Tokyo. I have a discovery associated to it, which is a default one, and it has gone and discovered a whole bunch of resources which I have in my VPC. So the one thing I want to note over here is like customers might say, oh, I already have a lot of VPCs. Will IPAM be useful for me? 100%, right? Because it discovers existing stuff. If you're lucky enough to be brand new in AWS and are thinking about scale, IPAM is a great way to get started as well. So let's look at the resource discovery. So it's the next step. So let's go to the resource discovery. Again, it will show you a whole bunch of resources at the bottom, a whole bunch of lists there. Not going to go through all of them. It tells you which accounts it has been discovered, it has looked into. So this is essentially all part of my organization, right? So the organization I showed you has gone through all of the accounts. Which regions have I discovered resources in? The 3 regions which we selected. And have I shared this with any other accounts further? Not really. So I've just done it for this particular account. So let's look at the resources it has discovered by going into the resources tab. Awesome. So I love this view, right? So it really shows you all the VPCs at a glance in a very kind of graphical manner. And I'll tell you a little bit about what each of this means, and in a quick way, right? Because we have quite a few things to demonstrate as well. Can you guys still hear me? Because I just got my AirPods telling me my battery is low.
Yeah, we can still hear you.
Can still hear me? Okay, perfect. So in this, it has discovered quite a few VPCs, and if you can see on the right-hand side, it's discovered all my 172 ranges as well, which is the default VPCs and all those accounts in all of those regions as well. So most customers go ahead and delete those VPCs, the default VPCs, security reasons, make it simpler, whatever it is. But in your IPAM, in your resources, you can actually go and ignore these if you really wish to, because then you don't really want it to come up inside your iPad, right? And it will show up as conflicting or overlapping all the time. So you can actually ignore them. So you can click on this little checkbox here on the VPC side, go to actions, and you can go mark CIDR as ignored. So that's essentially what I've done, and that's why you got these ignored statuses here.
Hey,
so
Ruskin,
that's your one.
Yep. The common question I hear from people is like, well, hang on, I'm a veteran AWS customer. I've got my organization. You know, why do I still have these default VPCs? And the reason for that is, for those that are interested, is it's to reduce friction, right? For most people, and most people who get into AWS, if you had to jump into an AWS account and it had no VPCs and no nothing, and you had to go and create that stuff, it would be a huge blocker to you actually getting anything done. So the default VPCs are great. They work. There's no problems with them. If you're a large customer and a corporate customer, what they tend to do is have an automated process where every time they stand up a new account in their organization, they delete the default VPCs because they have their own IP address plan. But for the vast majority of smaller customers, the default VPC is perfect because it's there to do stuff. So that's why the default VPC is always around.
100%, yeah. So we had I think when we set up a control tower automation, we had automation steps which actually goes and deletes the default VPC because it's got an internet gateway and everything, which might be security risk and things like that. But yeah, Brett is absolutely right. A lot of things we have used the default VPC, like when you're creating a database, etc. Cool. Actually, I might take my earphones off.
The beeping in his ears must have gotten to him.
Yeah, no, right. It gets annoying eventually.
But it also shows the number of different segments that AWS has to really think about when we are building out these services, because we have to go from the single mom and pop like businesses that only really want to host a website or do some really basic like services to like multinational, amazingly complex enterprises. And it's not easy to do that because adding more features generally means you're making things harder.
Yeah, and it's really easy, and customers ask us all the time, so why does it do that? That's really annoying. It's like, well, but because somebody else has asked for it to be that way. You know, so many of our features are built on customer feedback, and it's like, yeah, okay. So an IPAM is great here because you can go in and say, yeah, you know what? I actually don't want that to show up. because it's not really part of my network. So yeah, and it is very difficult to, as you say, to build stuff which is completely compatible with everyone's requirements. So
yeah. So that's a good point, Brett. You pulled out. So IPAM is more of a logical ignore. It doesn't actually delete the VPC in the background. So just be aware of that, right? I'm just saying, as an administrator, I don't really care about this range from like a dashboarding perspective, but it still exists in the background. So just be aware of that. Awesome. So next step to do is to look at pools. Time is going by so quickly. I guess it's that old moniker where time goes by when you're having fun. So I'll try and be really fast. But if you have any questions, please type it out. So I've created the pool which I showed you a while back, right? So those that hierarchy. So I have a top level pool with a /12. I have two other pools inside it, one for prod, one for dev. So you can envisage, like, you might have a supernet route which says all my prod VPCs are connected, all my dev VPCs are connected. So you can do that by separating out your CIDR ranges in a logical fashion using IPAM. Within my prod, I have two pools, one in Sydney and one in Singapore, and I was associated it with .4 and .5. Let's go into my Sydney one, because that's what I've used mostly for this demo. So the pool gives you a really top level view into how many resources you've used up, how many resources from the source pool you've used up, how many resources do you have available, how many are compliant, etc. So let's look into this dashboard a little bit. So the first one is that I have provisioned about 65,000 IPs. I've kind of used it up, which is around 52% of my allocated. Within the compliance, I only have one compliant CIDR range. All of the others are non-compliant, and I'll show you why that is. And within the source pool, I've used up 25% of the source pool, which is essentially a hierarchy up there. And up here, it also kind of quickly shows you that there is an overlapping CIDR as well, which is great. You want that, right? So you want to know quickly if there is some overlapping CIDRs, which will cause you some pain and heartache down the line. And you can go and approach the team or the developer or whoever it is to say, what's going on here? So let's look at CIDRs. So this one has a 10.4.16, but you can provision more CIDRs if need to. Let's have a look at the allocation. So the pool has allocated a few CIDR ranges out, which is essentially to a VPC, which I've created manually, and one through a CDK. So I'll quickly show you that as well. And the view which I really like is this view here. So let me go down a little bit. So it shows you all the different resources inside resources for that pool, for that scope, right? And it shows you the different VPC CIDRs or different CIDRs used up by these resources. So if you have a look at the CIDR column, you can see that I've allocated a few .24s, 125, a few 25s, a big 17 range as well. And you can imagine why some of these can be non-compliant, right? So let's look at the 24 and let's say why is it non-compliant? Right, so let's go into that. And if you go to the compliancy, you can see that the netmask is compliant because remember I said I'm only allowed to use 24, so that's all good to go. The tag is not compliant. So what I've said is anything which comes inside this pool should have a tag called prod because it's in the prod pool. But I made the mistake of saying of making this VPC without any tag for environment. So it's picked that up and marked it as non-compliant. So that's one way of looking at it. Let's go back to the resources. Some of the other ones. Let's look at 25, for example. And as you can imagine, this is probably netmask compliancy, and it says I should only have VPCs of 25, but this is actually a bit smaller with 24, and this is a bit smaller with 25, so it's kind of marked that up. And it's also got the tag compliancy is incorrect as well, so it's picked up both of those. So that's really good. Next one is the overlapping one. So I have got a VPC, this one, which is IPAM demo existing workload. And this is what the CI/CD one I was talking about, right? And it has essentially said, sorry, my screen has stopped working. Give me 1 second.
Oh, I think the demo gods have spoken, and
Yes, they have. Yes, they have, right? So I think where Ruskin is going with this, right, is IPAM is an amazing tool for tracking large environments. And it's specifically what it is for. Whether you are in single account or multi accounts, it's certainly better if you have those large accounts with lots of VPCs, and also multi-region, and as he demonstrated, across multiple organizations as well. So your ability to see, this is what my networking space looks like, and to manage it and to allocate those addresses out automatically as well, which is what Ruskin's about to talk about. You're back, man.
I'm back. Okay. Apologies. I think, Casey, you jinxed me before saying my screen is 10K and stuff. I blame you, man. Anyways, the joys of doing a live demo. Love it, love it. So let's go to the compliance here. So my CI/CD one. So this is essentially, it is now, it's telling me that this is, it's got a overlapping CIDR, and there is compliance will determine user latest allocation. So it hasn't picked up the compliancy. I think this is, let me just quickly, it's an unmanaged one. That's why it doesn't show any compliancy issues around here. So let me go to the one which is actually managed, which is overlapping this one. So it's this one here. So in the way the pool works is that it still picks it up into the pool, but it might be an unmanaged one. So if it's an unmanaged resource, it's not going to give you any compliant one. So this is the actual resource which is overlapping with the other one, but marked as non-compliant. So let's have a look at this one. So this is compliant from a netmask perspective, not from a tag perspective, but it has an overlapping CIDR. So the best way to go about looking at the two overlapping CIDRs is by diving a little bit deeper into this CIDR range, which is marked as overlapping. So let me go back to the resources viewer here and drill down into that IP range. And if I drill down into the IP range as a filter on top, it will immediately show you that one of my VPCs, which is IPAM demo existing workload CI/CD, and IPAM demo existing 4, which is managed, but the other one's not managed. But as you can see on the right-hand side, they're both using the .4.12 CIDR ranges. So you can quickly see how some overlapping things might have happened across your portfolio, across your VPCs, and quickly address it. Again, you can ignore the CI/CD one if you so choose to, just like you did with the 172 range, but it gives you a nice view into it. Awesome. So let's go. So I know we're running out of time, but what I'll do is I'll finish off this demo. We might not get a chance to look at everything else, but that's okay. Let's try and concentrate on the IPAM bit for today. Casey, is that okay with you?
Yeah, sure. We need to adapt.
Yeah, we need to adapt. That's exactly right. So that's how demos work, right? So some things are really too exciting to miss out on. Awesome. So let me close all my tabs on top. So it's quite a few.
We do have a question. Is it possible to create a policy to prevent overlapping ranges?
Sorry, say that question again.
Is it possible to create a policy to prevent overlapping ranges for IPs?
Overlapping regions or IPs?
No, ranges.
IP.
Yes, you can. So what do you mean by a policy? Tell me a little bit more about what you mean by that.
I'm assuming is there a way to automatically make it so you can't create a VPC or a CIDR range that has an overlapping range? Is that
right?
I'm assuming
yes.
Correct.
Yes, you can. So the way you can do it is using a service control policy, and I'll show you that. So let's go. So this is my shared services account. So let's go to my prod account. If it's still no, that's my shared services account as well. Let me go to my prod account. Cool. So in the prod account, essentially I've associated my IPAM pool with this account as well. And I haven't really told my account to force the usage of this pool. So if I go to my VPC, and if you can see all my VPCs in here, I have quite a few. So remember how you had a look at all those VPCs, where are they situated? In my prod account. And as you can see, you've got a whole bunch over here. The workload VPC existing. So let's go and create a VPC. Let me cancel out of it and grab the next range. Actually, no, I don't want to grab the next range. I just want to do a random range. So Twitch demo, what was it? 10.4.0.0 24. Or let me do 16 because I just do 16 ranges all the time. It's easy. So this will allow you to create it, right? And this is essentially overlapping everything. But what I can do further is put a SCP in here which says I can't create a VPC without using an IPAM. So in this one, I'm not using an IPAM. But if I really wanted to, I can check this box and say, I have to use this pool, right? And if I use this pool, which is prod Sydney, it will give me the next one available, which is 24. And I'm guaranteed not to have an overlap. But if you don't have that enabled and you just want to do a 416, I can essentially create this. There's nothing stopping me from doing it. But if I do have a service control policy on this account which says no way you can create a VPC without an IPAM, you can enforce this policy. So hopefully it answers that question where you can enforce it. So let's create. Yeah, go on.
I was just going to say that the funny thing about service control policies in an organization is that you can't override them, right? So if you put a policy in place that says you must use IPAM, then you have to use IPAM. That's fine, and that's actually a great use case for a service control policy. I've seen a lot of other cases where customers go, I'm going to use a service control policy because I want people to sometimes do this and sometimes do something else, and therefore I'm going to make it somehow conditional. That's a really bad use of a service control policy because it means that now you've got really, really complex rules. So this is a great, because you don't want overlapping IPs. You don't want the situation where people have been allocating stuff out of a spreadsheet and two people grab the same IP address range and stuff like that. So it's an awesome use case for SCPs, in fact.
Yeah, awesome. So let's show you those compliancy things as well quickly. So I've selected a pool here, but if you notice, I haven't got a tag here. Let me try and create this VPC, and it will actually tell you on top that this resource is missing a required tag. So that's this really good way of kind of enforcing some of those tags as well, which you require for those VPCs. So that's popping up here. Let me show you the service control policy as well while I'm here. So let me just grab that for me. Where did it go? There we go. And my prod Sydney. So if I go into manual and if I actually go 10.4.16 and actually create it without an IPAM pool. So this is one without an IPAM pool. And if I go create VPC, it will actually allow me to create that VPC because I don't have a service control policy. But if I go in and actually create a service control policy on this account, which I'll enable now. So let me go back into my organization account over here. And load it up quickly.
We need the lift music.
All right, so you can do it, but you can do it manually, Casey, I think. Yeah. Awesome. So let's go to policies, service control policies, and I have a policy which says IPAM VPC only. Let me go into the policy. It essentially says deny creating VPC or associating a VPC CIDR block if you're not using an IPAM pool of this ID. And this is essentially my prod VPC, prod Sydney IPAM pool, which I've done over here. If you note that it currently doesn't have any targets, but let me attach it to the prod account over here, right? And I am going to attach it. So it's got an attach. And let me go back into my VPCs and let me try creating the same thing, but without using the IPAM, which worked last time. But let me try one more time. Twitch demo. Let me do an overlapping IP again, 10.4/16. I'm choosing one manually, and I'm going to go create VPC. And there you go. So you got a big red juicy message on top. Saying you can't create this VPC because there's some kind of failure there, authorization failure message. So now I have to force myself to select that IPAM, and then I have to force myself to select that 24 And now I'm guaranteed that I will create this VPC without an overlapping IP with the right resource tag as well. So if I go environment and go prod, and if I go create, awesome, away it goes, and it's allocated the next available CIDR range from that pool. So how cool is that? Again, no Excel sheet. I don't have to talk to any other team. I can create VPCs, non-overlapping CIDR ranges, and away it goes. It will mark it as compliant. Everything is pretty good, all sweet. And this works with CLI and CDK as well. So let me just quickly show you that before I pass it on to Casey. So let me stop this screen share and present some CDK code.
For those that haven't come across CDK before, CDK is essentially I'm doing a disservice to our team here, but it's an amazing programmable wrapper around CloudFormation. So CloudFormation is infrastructure as code. You can say, here's my template. I want to deploy these things. CDK is an excellent way of automating the build of doing that. So you can write things in Python or in Node, in JavaScript, and go away and say, I want to build all of these things and write it in a language you're familiar with rather than having to learn the CloudFormation language itself. Really great in large environments for doing things that are very, very repetitive. So very, very powerful.
Awesome.
Yeah, there you go. It's shared.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Let me just authorize my cool. Awesome. So as you can see,
I'm only going to criticize Ruskin here for using JavaScript rather than Python, but that's fine. We'll live with it.
Oh, I am using TypeScript. Oh, rather than Python. Right. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, no way.
I'm really strict.
I'll just bypass that comment and just carry on.
They're not statically checked anyway, so they're not real languages.
Sure. Awesome. So I created one of those VPCs with CDK, as I was talking about, and it's quite easy in your CDK to use your IPAM. So this is essentially how you do it. And if you do end up using the incorrect mask or incorrect tags, for example, like I had to add that prod tag in there. If I don't do stuff like that, I get interesting errors, and it actually clearly tells you. Let me just. It actually clearly tells you if you do stuff without the right settings. So let's look at this one, and if I remember my shortcuts correctly, yep. So if I try and create this VPC, and if I create it in the wrong pool, for example, so here I'm going to use the Singapore pool, it's going to give me an error saying it's not in the correct region. If I use the wrong net mask, it's going to give me the right reason, and if I don't use the right tags, it's going to give me an error as well. So I only have 4 minutes, so I won't get a chance to run it. But again, CDK, like Brett said, great way of spinning up infrastructure automatically, repeatable, great use cases. You can do this in Python as well, so hopefully that kind of pleases Brett there. But yeah, very easy to use the IPAM inside your CDK as well. So apologies, the demo took a wee while, but there was a lot to get through. Hopefully you got a lot of value out of that. And if you're not already using IPAM, highly recommend using it. So I'm going to hand it back over to Casey.
Awesome. Thank you, Ruskin and Brett, for today's discussion and taking us through IPAM. If you do have any last minute questions, if you are watching us, do feel free to chuck them in. We will endeavor to answer them as always. And this is your, essentially last chance to do so. So, make sure you make the most of this opportunity. While we are doing that, I just want to say a few things. This is the last episode of this How to Be a Network Ninja. If you have watched all 5 parts of this series, then thank you very much for being a part of it. And if you are wanting to learn more, then definitely go into the VOD and watch the first 5 minutes of it, because then you'll have direct links to those shows in the version of a QR code. Next week, we are going to be diving into resiliency and how to build up resilience architectures. That is going to be pretty awesome. And we also have a special on the 25th of May at 7 p.m. New Zealand time, which I think inconveniently is like midnight for Pacific time. So And that's very much aimed at our time zone. So, which is going to be awesome. We are getting a serverless advocate, which works really, really closely with our serverless service teams, and going to be deep diving into a whole bunch of awesome serverless technologies and architectures and guidance and everything, all that good stuff. So I'm really looking forward to hosting that. In the meantime, looks like we haven't got any questions come through. So again, thank you, Brett, and thank you, Ruskin, for being on the show and taking us through IPAN and network optimization.
Awesome.
Pleasure.
Thanks for this, Casey. Appreciate it. Thank you, Brett, for joining us as well.
Yeah. Cool. And if you want to help impact what is going to be on the show, please join us on the LinkedIn. New Zealand's AWS technical community. It's a LinkedIn group. Just go there, add yourself to it, and just start sharing what you want to learn about, and we will try to provide. In the meantime, look after yourself and enjoy your weekend. Masiwa.
Bye, Ron.